What's good, YouTube, and welcome back to another KaibaHacksDartz Yu-Gi-Oh video. Today we're coming at you with another top 10, and this is top 10 wackiest cards, part 2. Now, of course, if you haven't seen the first video, make sure to check it out. I'll leave the link in the appropriate places, description, and possibly the comments and such. And, there's infinite cards in Yu-Gi-Oh, and more just keep coming. And there's so many that have unique effects or things that are wacky about them. So this is one of my favorite top 10s to do. Of course, we're going to be coming in and looking at the top 10 wackiest cards again. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to do that. We're almost at 100 subs. And we'll get straight into her. Coming in at the number 10 spot, we have Balloon Lizard. He's an Earth, level 4, 500 attack, 1900 defense, reptile effect monster. And what makes him special? We'll take a look at this effect right here. Put one counter on this card during each of your standby phases. When this card is destroyed, inflict damage equal to the number of counters times 400 to the controller of the card that destroyed this card. Now, it's a very strange card for the reason that it says put one counter, and obviously its effect is to the number of counters. So you'd think if you had other monsters that could maybe put, say, spell counters or what alien counters or something, on this guy. When he blew up, you'd think that his effect would activate on those counters, but it is only to his counters. So like how that there is different types of counters, spell counter, alien counter, his counters are just counters. So you'd think you'd be able to use other things to maybe stack up to get this effect to go off, but you can't. It's only Balloon Lizard counters that you can use. Even though they're not like specifically called anything, it's not talking about general counters, just its own counters. So I think that comes in at the number 10 spot just because it's weird like that. You'd think you'd be able to maybe make some plays happen with it, but it definitely has a wrench in it thrown in with the weird counter stuff that's going on with it. So coming in at the number 9 spot, we got Dummy Golem. Now this is very similar to a card I looked at in the past one. I won't spoil it, but let me know if you know what I'm talking about. But this is a flip monster, rock, level 2, Earth, Dummy Golem. He's got 800 attack, 800 defense, and he's select one monster that your opponent selects one monster that he/she controls, switch control of the selected monster in this card. So one thing that is a little weird, obviously that's just a weird effect, that it can go off and you can get some permanent keepage of someone's monster. But you do have to make sure he survives if he's getting attacked. So if he gets attacked while he's flipped face down and he dies, it doesn't matter even though he's a flip monster. Because you have to have something, he has to be swapped with that monster that you've targeted. So he does need to stay on the field. So you can use, different cards to keep him on the field. Whatever strats you want to decide to go with, obviously you could use something like a catapult zone, to maybe keep him alive, and to possibly go into some other rock plays if you're doing something like that. But overall, he is just another little strange card, so I think he fits in at the number 9 spot pretty well. Coming in at number 8, we have Old Mind. Now, this is just a real weird card, and it's obviously a spell. Look at one random card in your opponent's hand, then apply one of the following effects. You can discard both that opponent's card and one card from your hand of the same type, monster, spell, or trap, and then add this card from the field to your opponent's hand, and if you do, draw one card. So it's a weird way you could tech into some stuff, but obviously if you can't do it, or if you want to just choose to, you could lose 1,000 life points. And you can only activate one Old Mind per turn. So this could just stay on the field and keep going back and forth of hand popping and drawing cards. It's a weird card to kind of throw into play, because it puts something, into your opponent's hand that they could choose to use. They could do the same thing to maybe get that draw off, or they might lose life points, or get something out of your hand, but then it's going back into your hand and you can maybe do it again. So if you had enough of these and maybe some other weird cards going on, you could have some weird tech going on in your game where you're just maybe, exchange, stuff like that, where you're putting cards of yours into their hand and doing back and forth stuff like that. Coming in at the number 7 spot, we got 2 for 1 Team. Now it's a level 2 light monster, warrior effect, 1200 attack, 1200 defense. If you check it out, once per turn, you can make both players show one card from their hands, and if they're the same type of card, apply one of these effects depending on the type. So monster, each player can special summon that monster. Spell, each player draws 2 cards. Trap, each player sends exactly 2 cards from their deck to the graveyard. So there's obviously some weird decks where you could maybe have this in there if you're trying to get stuff into the graveyard from your deck, if you're just trying to draw cards, or if you're trying to special summon monsters, you know what I mean? There's a lot of weird plays this could come into, but it could give your opponent that advantage that they need too. So it is kind of a back and forthy card, almost like Old Mind, where it helps out both people if it's used the way it's, the way it's intended. Coming in at the number 6 spot, we got the Beasto Butcher. Now this he's just a dandy little purple creature looking fiend thing. He's dark, level 4 fiend obviously, effect monster, 1800 attack, which is half decent, 1000 defense. When this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent must draw 2 cards from his/her deck. So you can do some weird tech with this thing where you get it into your opponent's field, say you creature swap or you do something, then you could activate Scapegoat, maybe Escape Ghost, something to get you a lot of monsters on the field, or stuff that you could attack with multiple times, stuff like that, or stuff where you don't take damage from battles involving them. Anything like that, and then you can just slam into the Beasto Butcher. Oh, I guess you couldn't do the ones where you don't take damage, because, yeah, he does have to inflict that damage. But, anything like that where you can stall it out and take some damage that isn't too bad. Attack into the Beasto Butcher with the, Scapegoat, and you could draw a bunch of cards from your deck. What potentially you'd use that for, who knows? Maybe some weird Exodia stuff. Some just trying to get more cards. There's some weird plays you could do with it. Of course, you could maybe use it to deck out your opponent as well. You never know. So coming in at the number 5 spot, we have Major Riot. You can activate this card when one or more of your monsters are returned from the field to your hand. Return all monster cards in the field to your respective hands. Both you and your opponent can then special summon from your hand the same number of monsters on the field in face-down defense position. So there is a lot of cards that are sending back to hand nowadays, and especially if you're going up against someone where you know that they have a lot of plays, if that's something that's in their archetype a lot. You could run this, especially if you're a flip deck. There's a lot of weird potential that you could throw this into to try and get a bunch of monsters on the field and maybe, get an upper hand on your opponent. So I thought it deserved a nice spot on the list because it could have some infinite potential. It's just a really strange card. Coming in at number 4, we got Ceremonial Bell. Light, level 3, spellcaster effect monster. As long as this card remains face up on the field, you and your opponent must show your respective hands to each other. So this is one of those weird cards, almost like that the one telescope card, where you can get some insight onto what your opponent's doing, and potentially this could be very helpful if you're trying to, search a random card, or you're trying to, just get some different plays off with your deck, you know what I mean? There's a lot of weird potential that this little spellcaster effect can get going, this little bell monster. So there is weird potential for it. Not the best card, but it is strange that both you and your opponent would have to do that, you know what I mean? Coming in at the number 3 spot, one of my personal favorites in Yu-Gi-Oh! Something I'd like to make a deck around someday just for the, for the lulz. The Weather Report. Water monster, level 4. He's an aqua effect, 950 attack, 1500 defense. Flip monster, and he destroys all your opponent's face-up Swords of Revealing Light when he's flipped up. And if Swords of Revealing Light is destroyed, you can perform your battle phase twice this turn, or your next turn if it's activated on your opponent's turn. So there is some weird ways you could maybe get the swords into their hand, and then just hope that they activate it, pop this off and get into something beefy, and then you can do 2 battle phases in one turn. So, that it is pretty baffling if pull-offable, which, it's very rare. It's a sick little fun play. And like I said, something I'd love to make a deck around. Kind of going second, not much you can do with that deck. It's more, I'd say, a Master Duel deck, but in real life, going second, you'd have to almost not do your plays going first and hope you can get through it. And then second, because they're not going to use swords. If you have swords and you do it the first time, they know what the gimmick is. They're not going to do it the second time once you give it to them. So, it is something you have to work with. And who knows, more tech could come out for the weather report in the future. But coming in at the number 2 spot, we got Blasting the Ruins. Now this card is just an insane little burn damage card. Lots of tech potential to it. And you can only activate this card if there are 30 or more cards in your graveyard. Inflict 3,000 damage to your opponent's life points. So it's just a straight up 3,000. If you had a way to recycle it, you could use it a bunch of times. You can use more than one in one turn. So if you had 3 of them, you could go for that 9. If you could recycle it, you could do it when you need to. But getting 30 cards in your graveyard isn't the easiest thing in the world. There is some different ways to get into it. Some that you can't use now, some that, you never know. So you gotta tech around with it. Try and find some way to use Blasting the Ruins to really blast the ruins up good. That's why I think it deserved a second spot, because it's got those weird plays. You have to have 30 cards or more in your graveyard. That doesn't happen too often against most decks. So, something you have to look out for. Coming in at the number 1 spot, another one of my personal favorites, and personal favorite types of monsters out here. Amano Iwado. He's an Earth level 4 Rock Spirit effect monster. 1900 attack, 1200 defense. Can't be special summoned, because he's spirit. Monsters cannot activate their effects, except spirit monsters. So it's just total shutdown of anything that isn't spirit. But once per turn during the end phase, if this card was normal summoned or flip face up, return it to the hand. So there's a couple ways you can get out of it. If you can get some stuff to negate his effect until the end of the turn, he's golden. You know what I mean? If you can get to the next turn with it, he's G to B. Or if you can get some ways to maybe set him or, work around it so he isn't sent back to the hand. And of course, there is the spirit cards that work with him. And, you could just get rock support in there, / just the newer spirit support that they're coming out with. But there's a lot of ways to tech up Amano Iwado and maybe have it on your opponent's, to your opponent's disadvantage on their turn, and maybe flip it face down on your turn, or have it come back to hand when you need it. It's a good way, just shut down their plays. And I think that's why, he deserves number 1 spot, at least for the part 2, top 10 wackiest cards. Now, of course, if there's anything you think I missed, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Tell me what's good. And, let me know if you think there's any wacky cards that you've seen that I could possibly throw in a part 3 or, more in the future. And make sure to check out my other videos. I got top 10s, deck profiles, pack openings, and more. And you like what you see, like I said, subscribe. And thanks for watching. Peace.